The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
If the human race is hell-bent on destroying itself, what gives us the right to take the entire web of life down with us? Something to consider. And even at this very late hour, with the walls closing in from every direction, the human race as a whole, especially in first world nations, are behaving like the proverbial passengers in a car that has already crashed through the guardrail, is sailing through the air toward the bottom of the canyon, and all the passengers want to do is fight over what radio station to listen to. That's how absurd our current scenario on planet Earth is. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly edition of the Global Alert News Hour for September 23rd, 2017. The weekly Global Alert News Hour is a commercial-free hour of hard-hitting frontline data that you might not want to know but need to know. It's brought to you by GeoEngineeringWatch.org. This program is broadcast throughout Northern California on 1670 AM, 104.9 FM, and 105.7 FM. Global Alert News is also broadcast on the East Coast by the PRN radio network at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. My thanks to Gary Knoll for all he's doing for the greater good and for helping to get this news program out. Weekly announcement, as always, with Orchard Nutrition. You can get free materials there if you promise to put them to use. We try at our expense to supply to the Reading area at Orchard Nutrition materials to raise critical awareness on the climate engineering issue, which is threatening all life on Earth, with the 9/11 issue to wake people up to just how absurd the official narrative is on that most important issue, and the vaccination issue. We are still injecting ourselves and our children with known toxic materials. We now have peer-reviewed study to prove the harm it's doing, and still we have so many willing to just toe the line. More on that in a moment. I want to really explain the tribalist mentality that's still wreaking havoc, and I mean that in not a positive sense. Certainly there are certain benefits to certain cultural tribal practices, but not in the form that's currently helping to push our society and, again, the entire web of life off the edge of the cliff. I want to announce for Jim Fair this week, very strong and very valued ally in the fight to expose and halt climate engineering. The Jim Fair events this week, Salt Lake City, Utah at the Southtown Exposition Center. Next week, San Diego, California at the Scottish Rite Event Center. All you have to do is look up GemFair.com, GEMFAIRE.com, and you can find their data and where they're at. On the 6th of October in Sacramento, California, again at the Scottish Rite Center. Full geoengineering booth there, free materials. If you're near that region or where any of these events are going to be, please show up, show your support, get some materials there to help wake others up. Another important announcement for today, the Alzheimer's Walk in Reading today. I believe that's taking place at the Sundial Bridge at the Turtle Bay area. We need more activists to help with the essential efforts to expose the aluminum Alzheimer's connection, which the Alzheimer's Foundation does not acknowledge due to the influence of the aluminum industry executives that are involved with the Alzheimer's Foundation. Highly toxic climate engineering fallout elements are saturating our breathable air column with aluminum. Lab tests from all over the globe prove this. If you're in the Reading area and are willing to help us sound the alarm, show up at the event and look for Lori Bridgeford, who will be wearing a GeoEngineeringWatch.org t-shirt. Lori has our newest GeoEngineeringWatch.org flyers for handing out. Help us to alert the Alzheimer's Foundation supporters to the atmospheric aluminum threat, which the Alzheimer's Foundation itself apparently does not want their supporters to know about. In addition to completely disrupting all of Earth's climate and life support systems, climate engineering is, again, contaminating the entire web of life, and the amount of death and destruction already inflicted by 70 years of climate engineering in our skies could never be quantified. If it continues, on top of all the other forms of human damage to the planet, very soon nothing else will matter. I want to point this tragic headline out also. 20 veterans a day are committing suicide. 20. Why aren't Americans supporting our veterans who have been ruthlessly abused by the power structure that controls the American empire? I can never walk by a veteran who is forced to beg for money on a street corner. I always give what I can to them. Yet, how many cars I see driving past such individuals with patriotic bumper stickers slapped on their bumper, and I see them driving right past. That's the sort of patriotism we have in this country, sadly, to a large degree. It's bumper sticker patriotism. Before I get to headlines, I want to read this report on how tribalism overrules reason. This is why we live in such a factionalized society that's fractured with people who don't want to look at facts, and I'll get to that in a moment too. Quick report on that right after this, and then we'll get to headlines. But this is imperative to understand. We all need to look in the mirror and consider what sort of programming is at work in all of us. From this report, we're genetically wired to have a deep need to belong to a tribe. Humans are social animals. We've evolved to live in groups. During most of our evolution, to be rejected by our tribe meant almost certain death. So there are powerful forces at work, both internal and external, to make our beliefs and our behaviors conform to the norms of whatever group we identify as our tribe. We are all susceptible to this, whether we are conscious of it or not, even those of us who like to believe we are entirely rational thinkers. This is an excerpt from an article by David Ropick. He writes this: tribalism is pervasive and it controls so much of our behavior, readily overriding reason. Wars are essentially tribalism. Genocides are tribalism. Wipe out the other group to keep our group safe. Quote, taken to madness. Racism that lets us feel that our tribe is better than theirs. Parents who end contact with their own children when they dare marry someone of a different faith or color. Continuing from the report, during much of human history, an individual's tribe was determined by the small group of the person was born within. As societies have become larger and more complex, so has our sense of what our tribe is. At various times, we might consider our tribe to be our high school clique, the members of our church, the people who root for the same football team, people with the same skin color, people who vote Republican or Democrat or Green or whatever. Sometimes we might think of our entire nation-state as our tribe, while simultaneously feeling that certain subgroups within our nation are opposing tribes. It seems to me that our best hope is to work toward expanding our concept of our tribe to include ever wider circles. What if we could think of all humanity as our tribe? Something to also remember and consider. Continuing on this theme, this is a part of the tribalism mentality. It's a short report from the website helio.com. Facts don't change people's minds. And that is, in and of itself, an unfortunately true fact. From this report, the mind doesn't follow the facts. Facts are stubborn things, but our minds are even more stubborn. Doubt isn't always resolved in the face of facts, for even the most enlightened among us, however credible and convincing those facts may be. As a result of the well-documented confirmation bias, we tend to undervalue evidence that contradicts our beliefs and overvalue evidence that confirms beliefs and belief systems. We filter out inconvenient truths and arguments on the opposing side. As a result, our opinions solidify, and it becomes increasingly harder to disrupt established patterns of thinking. We believe in alternative facts only if they support our pre-existing beliefs. This pattern must be changed. If the human race cannot rise above its tribalism, behavior, and its propensity towards pre-programmed bias, ideology, belief systems, we have no chance. It's up to all of us to break these patterns, to help others to wake up. Here's a headline that fits into this particular theme. Senate backs massive increase in military spending for all those who think that more weapons are the cure. From this report, Washington, the U.S. passed its version of a $700 billion defense policy bill on Monday, backing President Donald Trump's call for a bigger, stronger military. That'll save everything. Let's make America great again and build more weapons while the planet implodes around us and ceases to support life. Here's another headline from Trump. And by the way, for Trump and for those who still are waving their flags, pretending Trump is some sort of messiah that's going to save us all, just like those did the same for Obama and for Clinton and all the rest. They're all puppets on the end of power structure strings. When will the population face that? Trump is just the current face of the beast. That's all he is. And perhaps he doesn't even realize what he's being used for. But that's exactly what's happening. So I'm sorry, the gloves are off with Trump. It's time to face reality. Another headline, Trump, U.S. would destroy North Korea if forced to defend itself. From this report, in his debut speech, he mocked North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, saying, Rocket Man is on a suicide mission. And by the way, when I read a report like this is in no way supporting this leader of North Korea, who's clearly not benevolent in any way, shape, or form, but it's simply pointing the finger where it also needs to be pointed. What's our country doing? We need to take a good, long look in the mirror. And who's the face of what our country's doing? And right now it's Trump. Continuing from this report, North Korea has tested nuclear bombs and missiles in defiance of the UN. Just before Trump spoke, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had urged statesmanship, saying we must not sleepwalk our way into war. The American leader also attacked Iran, saying it was a, quote, corrupt dictatorship which was intent on destabilizing the Middle East. Isn't that a profound statement from the leader of the country who introduced the Stuxnet virus into Iranian facilities, a virus which later escaped and appears to be responsible for preventing the Fukushima emergency systems from stopping that meltdown? And it's Iran that's destabilizing the Middle East. Iran, who hasn't invaded anyone for 230 years, while our country has invaded nearly 100 other countries, invaded and or occupied. And this is us pointing the finger at them? How absurd and hypocritical is this equation? The report continues. He, i.e. Trump, called on the government of Tehran to cease supporting terrorism and again criticized the Obama-era international agreement over Iran's nuclear programs, which he called an embarrassment. First, Iran is allowed to have nuclear power. They have signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement. Israel hasn't. How come nobody says anything about that? And they're 200 to 400 nuclear weapons. Nobody says a thing about that. Total hypocrisy in this country. If we caught... Everybody remembers the raft special forces scenario where Iran caught our special forces in a raft in their waters, right off their shores, and let them go in 24 hours. And we all know if the reverse had been true, it would not have happened here. If we caught some Iranian special forces off the coast of Catalina Island, they would still be incarcerated. We all know that's true. The United States of hypocrisy, that's what we're living in right now. Another headline from the UK Independent, London terror attack. Trump says internet must be, quote, cut off to stop further attacks. That's the Donald Trump that's going to put everything out in the open, isn't it? They're all part of the power structure. Trump, Clinton, all the rest. And I want to repeat again, why didn't Trump pursue Clinton for her crimes? Both the Clintons should be in jail, but they're not, because all of these people work together. They're all part and parcel of the same power structure. Time to face that fact. From this report, Donald Trump says that the internet, quote, must be cut off to stop further terror attacks. Responding to the terror incident in Parsons Green Tube Station, he, i.e. Trump, said that the internet was a terrorist recruiting tool. He continues by saying, loser terrorists must be dealt with in a much tougher manner, Trump wrote. The internet is their main recruitment tool, which we must cut off and use better. He continued, we're losing a lot of people because of the internet, Trump said. We have to see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. Bill Gates, there's someone who's really here for the common good, isn't he? Making his vaccinations that are literally are sponsoring that. And again, Bill Gates is only a puppet in the play as well, but vaccinations that have proven to increase the mortality of African children by 500%. How benevolent is Mr. Bill Gates and those who really control him? Trump continues, we have to talk to them about maybe in certain areas closing the internet up in some ways. Somebody will say, this is from Trump, somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. Did you hear what I just said? Trump's quote, somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. And those who say that, in Trump's words, are foolish people. There's the Donald Trump that we really have. A face for the power structure. That's all he is. Another one, another headline. The Trump administration is cracking down on whistleblowers. No surprise there either. Thomas Drake and John Carrico are determined to push back. Two real patriots. And for those who don't know who these people are, in the case of John Carrico, for example, he is the whistleblower that blew the whistle on our country illegally torturing detainees that had never been charged with the crime. And guess who the only person to get locked up was? John Carrico. And is Trump trying to expose the swamp creatures as he said he would do? No, he's one of them, and he's continuing to fill the swamp with the same, just like himself. With the Trump administration, we're seeing a very troubling and alarming development. This is from the report. They have publicly announced threats to crack down on press freedom and civil rights and further criminalize speaking truth to and about power by whistleblowers as sources for the press. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is clearly suggesting that the practice of journalism is a direct threat to national security. The practice of exposing the truth is a direct threat to national security, isn't it, Mr. Sessions and Mr. Trump and Clinton and Obama and all the rest? This is an extremely disturbing report. The press is the fourth estate and has a vital role in protecting our liberties and the special form of democracy under the First Amendment of the Constitution, while also informing the public about the government and its conduct. President Trump and Attorney General Sessions have unambiguously signaled a highly dangerous outlook. And in regard to the press, which the power structure owns the majority of anyway, but for the few that are willing to tell the truth, they want to crack down on them as well. That's our government. That's Mr. Trump. He's just another faction of the power structure, all being controlled by those who print the money, ultimately. Another headline, U.S. establishes first permanent military base in Israel. No surprise there. From this report, for the first time ever, the United States has established a permanent military base in the nation of Israel, in the nation's Negev desert. Israeli Brigadier General, I don't want to pronounce that name, the head of Israel's Aerial Defense Command, said it was a historic move and proves America's strategic commitment to support Israel. Israel gets more aid by far than most of the rest of the world combined. So this is no surprise, is it? And the United States government and Israel are joined at the hip. Anyone who doesn't know that and understand that needs to wake up. Another headline, gold, oil, and de-dollarization. Russia and China's extensive gold reserves, China yuan oil market. Disconnection from the petrodollar. That's exactly what's happening. From this report, for several years, both the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China have been buying huge volumes of gold, largely to add to their central bank currency reserves, which otherwise are typically in dollars or euro currencies until recently. It was not clear why. Well, it was not clear to anybody who wasn't paying attention. It was clear to any of us that were. Disconnection from the global reserve currency, the currency of the empire, the petrodollar, that has allowed the empire to go completely out of control and wreak havoc around the globe. And other countries have had enough. And not that these countries are innocent, by the way. Russia and China, the corruption, the criminality, the destruction of the planet from these countries, also immense. But this is simply a move that is now making the U.S. empire more dangerous than ever, because if they lose the dollars, the global reserve currency, they lose the ability to print whatever they want for whatever they want. Now, about countries that no longer go along with the petrodollar, which is starting to topple the empire, again, making them more dangerous than ever. And as the biosphere collapses, and ultimately that's the bottom line, biosphere collapse will dictate everything else. We all need to remember that. That's what's dictating the desperation we see around the globe. It's connected to biosphere collapse, not enough to go around. Bottom line, what happens when there's not enough to go around? The law of the jungle ensues. That's where we're headed. But as these other countries have had enough of the empire, controlling and devastating their countries, they're disconnecting from the dollar. Here's another headline on that theme. All in one day, Venezuela drops the dollar and gets accused of drug peddling by the United States. This headline, here's the headline itself. Venezuela accused of drug peddling after dropping U.S. petrodollar trade scheme. From this report, U.S. President Donald Trump recently signed a determination that singles out Venezuela for failing to adhere to counter-narcotics obligations. The accusations came, perhaps not so coincidentally, on the same day that Venezuela declared it will no longer participate in the U.S. petrodollar trade system. Final statement for this report. In what is set to be a major blow to the U.S. increasingly fragile petrodollar system, Venezuela announced on Wednesday that it would no longer accept U.S. dollars as payment for its crude oil exports. According to the Wall Street Journal, Venezuela has begun using euros in lieu of the dollar and will convert existing cash holdings into euros as well. Not a good alternative. Euros is still a Ponzi scheme of sorts, but they're disconnecting from the dollar. And isn't that ironic and hypocritical that the U.S., the drug trading nation of the U.S., who invades Afghanistan and opium production goes through the roof again after the U.S. takes over, and we have the massive opiate addiction in the U.S. thanks to the U.S. drug peddling scheme of the medical industrial complex. And here we are accusing Venezuela of this. How obvious could this sort of retribution be toward Venezuela for refusing to continue funding the Ponzi scheme of the empire, the petrodollar? I want to dive into this report a little further because there's other relevant facts contained in it. However, the official website of Venezuela's state oil company has begun offering prices in the Chinese yuan, not euros. Disconnection from euros as well. The decision is similar to one once made by former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, who dropped the dollar in favor of the euro a few years prior to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Major factor in invading and taking out Saddam Hussein. The United States empire, with the global reserve currency of the dollar that allows them to print whatever they want for whatever they want. And this is when I hear people thinking that if they stop paying taxes, somehow that will slow down the empire. It won't, because they print whatever they want. The taxes they charge you are primarily to keep you mired in your own struggles. They print whatever they want, and they can't afford to have any nation not using the dollar to sell and buy oil or as the reserve currency. So whenever a nation tries to not do that, tries to break from the system, break from the mafia of the central banker money printers, they are taken out. Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, and others. So we see what happened to Saddam Hussein shortly after he disconnected from the dollar. The report continues. Venezuela's decision to drop the dollar was immediately followed by Trump's signing of an annual determination of countries considered to be, quote, major drug transit or major drug producing areas. Wow, isn't that hypocritical for the United States of America with the medical industrial complex that is turning our whole country into addicts to point the finger at others? Isn't that astounding? Report continues. Venezuela was singled out and blacklisted, quote, in the document for failing to adhere to counter-narcotics obligations. The drug war is a joke, by the way. It's a complete joke. And I don't speak of the local scenarios where we're getting the drug farmers out of our forest. That's all well and good. And I know a lot of law enforcement in Shasta County. I support what they're doing. In fact, thanks to them and their help in my acreage on the east side of Lake Shasta, our habitat reserve, we have not had any trouble from the local drug lords that were once here in this area. So again, we're talking about a completely different scenario. We're talking about a global scenario here. So I want to clarify that. I am grateful to Shasta County sheriffs for doing their best at keeping our forests free of the drug dealers. Moving on. In contrast, Bolivia, under the leadership of the progressive and anti-imperialist Evo Morales, has the fewest illegal coca crops of any South American country. And some have credited Morales' decision to expel the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, as having led to the nation's notable decrease in cocaine production. Isn't that amazing? When Evo Morales of Bolivia got rid of the U.S. DEA, he was able to greatly reduce the amount of illegal coca crops. Those dots connect in a very damning way, don't they? Final paragraph from this report. While drug trafficking does occur in Venezuela, the U.S. has taken to accusing top Venezuelan officials of complicity in the drug trade without evidence. That's usual, isn't it? Anybody who challenges the empire gets accused of something with no evidence, or tortured, or whatever. Without evidence, as the relationship between the two countries has continued to deteriorate. For instance, in February, the U.S. accused the Venezuelan vice president of having, quote, drug trafficking links without providing any substantial evidence. The accusations have not been verified, which is no surprise because anyone who challenges the empire is accused of something. Anyone who challenges the behavior of the empire. Finishing from this report, though the U.S. did not explicitly connect Trump's condemnation of Venezuela's alleged failure to curb drug trafficking to the country's decision to stop accepting dollars as payments for oil, its condemnation still aids in building the case for U.S. intervention, back to the war machine now, and thus regime change. That's what the U.S. does best, regime change. And we accuse others of interfering in our democracy like the completely bogus, and though I do not like Trump in any way, shape, or form, or Clinton, or Obama, or Bush, or any of the rest, the whole interfering with the election by exposing the crimes of Hillary Clinton nonsense is so utterly and totally absurd when our country is invading, toppling, creating coups in other countries routinely. It's routine for our country. Look up how many countries has the U.S. invaded and or occupied in the last 100 years. You will be shocked, absolutely shocked. And we're pointing the finger at another country for supposedly, allegedly exposing the crimes of Hillary Clinton. Why wouldn't we want to know what her crimes are? All of these people are dirty, including Trump. And just because he's being accused by the criminal media doesn't mean he's innocent himself. Let's face reality on that. CIA Director Mike Pompeo and Vice President Mike Pence have recently argued that Venezuela is, quote, a threat to the U.S. national security. And President Trump has stated that the U.S. has, quote, many options for Venezuela, including a possible military option if necessary. Listen to that. Anyone who challenges the empire faces the barrel of a gun. We're spreading, quote, freedom and democracy all over the globe at the end of a gun barrel. And we see these military recruiting commercials which absolutely make me furious. They're so unimaginably propagandistic. We're good, they're bad. Join our team. We need to see through this. We need to wake up from the stupor that our country is in, an absolute semi-comatose stupor, and face what our country is doing, about to start World War III everywhere. And the ultimate bottom line is, again, not enough to go around. Countries that have had enough of being ruled, controlled, and lorded over at the end of a barrel of a gun, the U.S. empire, they've had enough. They're disconnecting from the dollar. That's undermining the empire. The empire is incredibly desperate. That's why the invasion of all the Middle Eastern countries, they knew this was coming. They needed to get resources to keep the military-industrial juggernaut of insanity fueled. The single biggest consumer of fossil fuel on the planet, the U.S. military. The single biggest polluter on the planet, the U.S. military. And what does the current administration want to do now? Unlike everything he said in his campaign, and again, Trump, just a puppet, representing the military-industrial complex, they want to start blowing things up. They want conflict, because that's the only thing that fuels their business, if you will, the military-industrial complex. That's where we're headed. And again, it all boils back down to biosphere implosion, not enough to go around, things that can't be hidden much longer. And before they allow the American population to wake up and understand what's going on, what's been done to them, with even recent issues like the cyclone weather warfare. Just posted a video yesterday, another one on that. I encourage people to look at the individual videos we have on Harvey, Irma, Maria. Look at the weather modification control that is helping to steer those hurricanes where they went and hold them there. This is weather warfare. Hurricanes are natural. Yes, we will have more hurricanes on a warming world. Yes. But they can and are being manipulated for very nefarious purposes and used against our own countries, our own civilians. And some people have suggested or tried to suggest, out of total desperation and total program tribal mentality, that somehow North Korea is manipulating the weather to impact our country. What an incredibly absurd notion that is. Of course this is our military. Of course this is our country. Do we think North Korea is controlling radio frequency transmitters in Key West and all over the continental U.S. that are controlling hurricanes. Somehow they're magically controlling this from North Korea. This is the epitome of programmed ideology and blindness, willful blindness. This is our own country. Do we think that do we think that the Arabs really carried out 9/11, that it was directed from a diabetic Arab in a cave somewhere in Afghanistan, outwitted the U.S. military to carry out 9/11? That's completely absurd. On all these issues, we have a population that simply doesn't want to know the truth, but you can't hide from it much longer. And those people living in Texas and Florida and now Puerto Rico that just got slaughtered with what can only be considered weather warfare, and those who challenge that, you have not examined the facts. You've not examined the footage we have. You've not examined the historical data we have to prove cyclone modification and manipulation has been going on for 70 years. We are entering a new stage of the insanity as the power structure becomes immensely desperate for all the reasons I've gone over in this program and others. It's coming, and it's been coming. It's been coming for a long time. That's what 9/11 was all about. For those who don't know what PNAC is, Project for a New American Century, which had people sitting on their board like Cheney and Wolfowitz, the rest of the war hawks, the desk chair war hawks that have never been in the front line of anything, but they've been responsible for killing countless people. PNAC stated a year and a half before 9/11, the Project for a New American Century, which involved countless members from our own government, stated they needed a, quote, new Pearl Harbor to galvanize the American population toward their goal of military expansion and occupation. How obvious are these dots to connect? How incredibly obvious. How many so-called patriotic Americans don't want to open their eyes and see the truth? The train is completely off the rails. So again, 9/11, the event that was designed to galvanize the American population, to make them afraid of the, quote, terrorists are going to come get us if we don't go get them first. And the whole affair is about resources. It comes down to resources, again, that the military-industrial complex needs to continue fueling its insanity, a runaway cancer, a headless, heartless, soulless beast. And for those who serve that cancer, you're a part of the problem. And this is not in any way to take away from the motives of so many past veterans that have given all to what they believed to be the greater good, but it wasn't. I'm sorry to say that, and I'm sorry for those it disappoints. It was not the greater good. Who could think Vietnam was for the greater good, or any of the conflicts since? A known, proven false flag event in Vietnam that killed 60,000 of our sons and daughters, countless civilians, millions of civilians still dying, thanks to the toxic mess we slung around in their countries. Wake up if you have any interest in preserving a future for your children or yourself, because our near-term horizon is very dark. If you have any interest in preserving anything, wake up and look at facts and think about what I said at the beginning of this program. Dump your tribalism, dump your ideology, dump your preconceptions, and look at facts. In regard to polluting the planet, again, as the U.S. military is so proficient at, let's look at some more headlines. Where do they put all that toxic hurricane debris? And let's trace this back to the weather warfare that's created that hurricane debris to begin with, and who is responsible for that weather warfare, and doesn't that ultimately lead back again to the U.S. military and those they are involved with? And climate engineering, weather warfare, which is toxifying every breath we take, decimating Earth's life support systems, and that's why GeoEngineeringWatch.org is focused on that issue above all others, while we have these so-called environmentalists focusing on everything but climate engineering. How hypocritical is that? And I'm an environmentalist through and through. But if we're not focused on the biggest problem of all, what are we doing? And the whole of the environmental community, with very few exceptions, is doing everything but focusing on the most important issue of all. On this hurricane report, Hurricanes Harvey and Irma left a, quote, hell of a mess. Millions of tons of debris, much of it toxic. Houston officials said this week it will cost at least $200 million to dispose of 8 million cubic yards of storm debris. More than 100,000 homes in Houston are damaged. Irma caused billions of dollars of damage across the Caribbean and the southern United States. Wood, plaster, drywall, metal, oil, electronics, all of it waterlogged, put into unlined landfills, and it can contaminate groundwater. It's not that it can contaminate groundwater. It obviously will contaminate groundwater. That's easy to figure out. The gypsum in drywall decomposes into hydrogen sulfide gas, and it might all get thrown away together. Anyway, hydrogen sulfide, for those that don't know, heavier than air, sits on the ground, highly toxic. It's not that it could happen, it will happen. Final sentence from this report: no one is interested in separating garbage after a hurricane, says Elena Kraft, a senior scientist at the Environmental Defense Fund in Austin. But there are real threats that exist from this process. She's certainly right about that. But how come EDF, the Environmental Defense Fund, will not communicate with the Legal Alliance to Stop Geoengineering? Our legal team, they won't. They don't want to talk about climate engineering. Total hypocrisy. They're just whacking away at the leaves and not getting at the root. What caused this massive disaster? Weather warfare. And again, not that cyclones wouldn't have happened otherwise. There will be immense cyclones if the planet is released from climate engineering. The oceans are superheating. Cyclones are the warm oceans are the fuel for the cyclones. We will have immense weather whiplash when climate engineering is stopped. But that these particular cyclones behaved in this particular manner and hit in these particular places, we can absolutely attribute to the manipulation of those storms with patented cyclone manipulation processes. Do some investigation. Continuing. Another headline: abandoned North Sea wells may be emitting significant amounts of methane, study warns. From this report, abandoned offshore oil and gas wells in North Sea may be a source of significant methane emissions, finds a new study which claims to be the first measure of the amount of methane leaking from offshore wells. Finally, we did a study. I wonder how long that took. According to the study published recently in the Journal of Environmental Science and Technology, about 1/3 of the region's wells could be releasing between as much as 17,000 tons of methane into the North Sea each year. This process, this possesses a significant contribution to the North Sea methane budget, it states. But despite the scale of emissions that may be leaking from abandoned wells, these emissions are not currently being monitored by regulators or operators. What a surprise. Just look the other way and pretend it isn't happening, and maybe it will go away. This is how the whole system is set up, to simply ignore reality. Pretend it's all going to magically go away. Let's dump all the toxic hurricane-damaged waste somewhere, and the population thinks it somewhere just magically went away. It doesn't go away. This is the human race's behavior that can only be described as a propensity toward self-inflicted omnicide on the planet. That's how our species is behaving. Instead of planting trees that are essential for our continued survival on this planet, we're cutting them down and building tanks and ships and jets. That's not the behavior of a sane species. It's not. Another headline: U.S. wildfire costs exceed $2 billion, a record amid a year of extremes. From this report, the wildfire season that has leveled hundreds of homes, closed roads, and not getting enough attention, by the way. The hurricanes were a big distraction from the total western meltdown that's now undergoing an engineered cool down. I'll get to that in a moment. The wildfire season, again, leveled hundreds of homes, closed roads, parks, and sent hazy smoke into major cities across the West, has become the most expensive in U.S. history, officials said Thursday, marking another chapter in a year of brutal extremes linked to climate change. Where's the climate engineering mention in that report? How can we live in a society with legions of academicians, legions of them, who turn two blind eyes to the climate engineering elephant in the room, which is the single greatest factor for the forests burning to the ground? Single greatest factor. Not that anthropogenic sources of damage to the planet aren't real. They're very real, and there's countless sources. But the single greatest factor with the forests incinerating is climate engineering. Why? Disrupting the hydrological cycle, dumping toxic rain on the forest floor, laden with aluminum that peer-reviewed study proves damages root systems, stops the tree's nutrient uptake. It's creating more dry lightning, which is creating more fires. It's destroying the ozone layer, which is frying the trees from the top down. It's coating the forest with an incendiary dust, which makes it burn hotter. Climate engineering, never mentioned by the legions of academicians who are simply betraying the human race and the entire web of life at this point. And I realize there's gag orders on them. And for those who don't know that, again, a reminder, illegal federal gag orders right now on all NOAA and National Weather Service employees. Finishing this report, a menacing 1-2 punch of record rain last winter and a record heat this summer followed a historic drought in several western states, gave birth to a bumper crop of grass and brush that has since dried out and burned up. They always blame it on something else. It's just the beetles killing the trees. Why are the trees weak to begin with? Because of all the reasons I just mentioned. Never climate engineering mentioned. Ever. Now, it's not just the U.S. that is undergoing the freeze-fry scenario. And for those that haven't seen it, go to geoengineeringwatch.org. Just did a post to outline the freeze-fry scenario. You have to see the maps to believe it. From a whole summer of the western U.S. frying while the eastern U.S. was kept cool, we now have the reverse of that happening. And again, look at the maps. Go to geoengineeringwatch.org under the top stories and recent sections and look at those short videos so you can understand how completely engineered the weather whiplash scenarios are. So now let's go to Australia. Southeastern Australia's freezing snap set to last all week. Severe weather warnings are in place for 2 states as an Antarctic-fueled cold snap makes it feel as if it's 22 degrees C below in some areas. It may be spring, and this is how the media hypes these engineered cool downs. It may be spring, but much of Southeast Australia has gone straight back to winter conditions. They really, really hype that, just as the Weather Channel hypes that whenever there's an engineered cool down, while other parts of the country, or most of the country, is frying. So, where did this cool down occur? In the most populated regions of Australia. Why there? Because that's how they can keep the biggest percentage of the population confused and divided in regard to the true state of the climate. So, how warm was it in Australia this winter overall? How about this headline? Australia's hottest winter on record. Maximum temperatures going through the roof. How about that? Hottest winter on record by far, and yet we have an engineered cool down in the most populated regions of Australia and a lot of media hype surrounding it. I want to read a report from a contact I have in this region. Just got this. Hello, Dane. You're probably following it, but just in case you are not, I wanted to share the following with you. We are having a flu epidemic that is killing people here in Victoria. That's where the cold snap is. Remember the freezing fog, the toxic fog in UK that I covered last week? From chemical ice nucleation, certainly. People sick going into the hospital because of chemical ice nucleating elements that are being used in the moisture to cool down the surface, to create these headlines, to create the engineered cool down. Continuing from this message from my contact in Australia about people being sick in Victoria, and it has been windy and the air is putrid more than ever. People are struggling to breathe, including one of my friends who ended up in the hospital. Even I can't get rid of a persistent cough that I have never had. The mainstream media is propagating the extended winter narrative, as I just spoke about, despite the fact that most days and nights have been above average, even now. I've been watching the jet stream animations and looking at satellite imagery. I can see a lot of activity, i.e. aerosol spraying, where the southern polar jet stream is. No doubt they are manipulating the jet stream and bringing the frigid Antarctic cold north and chemically ice nucleating it. That is where the dispersed material is coming from the climate engineering jet operations. These dots are not hard to connect. It's real, it's ongoing, and if you think you can hide from this, anybody listening to this program, if you think you can hide from what's going on and what's coming, you're going to be in for a rude awakening very, very soon. The ship is going down and we're all on it, and if we don't do something about it, we're going to go down with it. That's a mathematical certainty. More headlines. The western U.S. has gone from months of record heat to near overnight record lows. And here's a headline from Elko, Nevada. Storm shatters temperature record, drops more than an inch of rain. Same thing. Same thing that's happening in Australia. For those who want to see just how extreme this engineered weather whiplash scenario is, again, go to geoengineeringwatch.org. Look at the freeze-fry scenario post short video underneath the top stories and recent sections. Now, there's an anomalous, extreme teardrop-like dip in the jet stream over the western U.S. right now, which has helped to facilitate the weather whiplash short-term cool-down in the western U.S. But now the eastern U.S. is heating up radically. After a very extended period of engineered cool-down much of it utilizing the moisture from the cyclones, which is part of the agenda behind the cyclones. Many agendas behind manipulating cyclones, many. I cover much of it on geoengineeringwatch.org, but it's a complex scenario, not just this or that. So we have this about 2017 as a whole. This is a summary for getting past all the short-term toxic engineered cooldowns that the media hypes up to try to hide the true state of the climate. Here's a headline, a recent headline. 2017 is so unexpectedly warm, it's alarming climate scientists. From this report, 2017 is so unexpectedly warm, it's alarming climate scientists who are calling it, quote, extremely remarkable. 2017 heads toward a possible record hottest year even without an El Nino event. And even with official high temperatures being underreported, not overreported, underreported. Now, how is all this information effectively hidden from the public? And why are all the meteorologists, all the climate reporting agencies, why are they not reporting on this? As I've already stated, illegal federal gag order on all government scientists. But in addition to that, as I've stated over and over on previous shows, and this headline confirms so much of what I've already said on previous programs. Again, Raytheon, private defense contractor Raytheon, who is neck deep in climate engineering operations and patents. Raytheon wins $269 million weather service data system support for modeling. What does that mean? It means that this private defense contractor is doing all the weather modeling for National Weather Service and NOAA and all your local meteorologists, like our Mike Kruger here in Northern California with KRCR, who's simply reading a script. And if you don't believe Mike's reading a script, and you believe I'm wrong and he's right, then get Mr. Kruger to actually attend a public town hall meeting and share his facts. I'll be there and share mine. And we'll see who you believe is telling the truth. But Mr. Kruger or Mr. Mangus at KRCR or the Record Searchlight in Northern California or wherever you're at, wherever your local news agencies are, see if they'll debate you on these facts and make sure you have some credible data there, and they can't. Because the foxes are running the henhouse from top to bottom. Private defense industry contractor Raytheon making these scheduled weather models so that the local meteorologists can read from their scripts. And that's exactly what they're doing. Another headline. Neil deGrasse Tyson. For those who don't know who he is, he's on the science channels constantly. He's sort of the face of the science media, if you will. Says it might be too late to recover from climate change. Very ambiguous statement. Let me make this clear. People ask me this all the time. Is it too late? Is it too late? To return to a planet that's remotely close to what we've known, the hospitable, thriving planet we've known, yes, it's too late. We are absolutely through the guardrail. No going back in any time frame that matters. Can we still salvage some of Earth's life support systems? Yes, perhaps. Nature is unimaginably, incomprehensibly resilient. We know this. In the deepest, darkest, thickest concrete jungle, if there's a crack in the asphalt anywhere, something grows up through it. That's nature. And we must release nature from the insanity of the industrialized, militarized society that we're all a part of right now. We must release it, starting with stopping the intentional effort to manipulate Earth's life support systems. That's what climate engineering is. The highly toxic intentional effort to manipulate Earth's life support systems. And of course, Mr. deGrasse will not mention that ever. From CNN, scientist and astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson said Sunday that in the wake of devastating floods and damage caused by Hurricanes Harvey and Irma, no mention of climate engineering, of course, climate change had become so severe that the country, quote, might not be able to recover, starting to prepare the population for what's happening. And there's no chance that Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't know climate engineering is going on. He's simply playing his part in the play. Like Trump, like Obama, like the rest. They're playing their part in the play. They've sold their honor, their virtue, their morality long ago. Long ago. The only thing they ever own, the only thing any of us can truly call our own, our honor, our virtue, our morality. How many people in our society have become mindless, honorless order followers, doing whatever they're told? In an interview on CNN's GPS, Tyson got emotional when Fareed Zakaria asked what he made of, quote, Homeland Security Advisor Tom Bassett's refusal to say whether climate change had been a factor in hurricanes Harvey or Irma's strength, despite scientific evidence pointing to the fact that it had made the storms more destructive. Tyson told Zakaria that he had, now listen to this, here's Tyson who's lying through his teeth, lying of omission about climate engineering, telling Fareed Zakaria this, that Tyson had no patience for those who, as he put it, cherry-pick scientific studies according to their belief system. Wow, is that not the pot calling the kettle black? What hypocrisy from Tyson, who is saying nothing about the climate engineering elephant in the room. Running out of time, I need to finish up. Here's a letter that when you see someone who's lying, and you know they're lying, an author of an article or a media person or something, send a message to them, a clear, coherent message to let them know that we know they're lying. Here's a message I just sent to just such an author who did not allude to climate engineering, in fact, denied that climate engineering was happening. A scientist. Hello, Mr. Moore. When academicians like you, and I sent this letter to him and CC'd others, when academicians like you deny the ongoing climate engineering atrocities, you are completely betraying populations that have a right to know that highly destructive and toxic geoengineering operations are being conducted without their knowledge and consent. This message is to let you know that we at geoengineeringwatch.org will do our best to expose the disinformation you are propagating to the public. One can only conclude that once the public is fully awakened to the ongoing climate engineering insanity, and that wake-up is already occurring rapidly, by the way, that the public will hold legally and morally accountable all those who willfully participated in the criminal climate engineering covered-up. Something to consider. Signed, Dane, Wigington, GeoEngineeringWatch.org. Send out such a message to these people. Hold them accountable. Now, I'm almost out of time. I want to wrap this up in a way that makes clear just how much we're being deceived. 2 articles out this week. Total deception from those who, quote-unquote, claim to care about the environment. And they are doing nothing but what the power structure tells them to do, dictates they do, or what their own denial dictates they do. Here's the headlines. Mathematics predict a 6th mass extinction from that report. By 2100, oceans may hold enough carbon to launch mass extermination of species. Let's consider that headline. In 2100, and what does a headline like that do? It puts people back to sleep because the vast majority don't care. If trouble's over the horizon somewhere, they don't care. They continue to live as they have. That headline is so patently false that those who printed it should be held accountable with just such a message as that which I just read. Mass extinction is here, now. Let me follow up with another headline that's already a year old from National Geographic. Living Planet Index predicts loss of 2/3 of animals by 2020. And that headline's a year old. And we're already there. We're already there. 2/3 plus of Earth's wild animal population are gone. We're losing 300 species of plant, animal, and insect a day to mass extinction. That's 15,000 times the background extinction rate. That's 1.5 million% more than the background extinction rate. Is that not mass extinction right here, right now? And yet we have from MIT last week stating, gee, we could have a problem by 2100. We're swimming in a sea of mass deception, swimming in a sea of utter and total insanity. We have to face that fact. All of us. We have to be part of the problem and not the solution. Our lives cannot go on as they were. We're not going to get much further down the road if we don't change our behavior. And changing our behavior starts with waking the masses up to what's unfolding. And there is an immense effort by the power structure right now to pacify the American population, again, until the last possible moment, because the greatest potential counterbalancing force on the planet right now is the American population. If they would wake up, turn the football games off, and face reality. That has to happen, or we will not get much further down the road. Denial won't save us. And there's more than enough of it to go around on all sides of the fence. If a larger percentage of the human race does not soon find the strength and courage to rise above the current epidemics of ideology, preconception, and program bias, we'll soon reach the end of the epoch of man, along with most or perhaps even all of life on Earth. That's the course we're on. We must all make every possible effort to see the world through a clear lens, though doing so can challenge everything we thought we knew and that we wanted to believe. We must all arm ourselves with credible data based on verifiable frontline facts. Check the homepage of GeoEngineeringWatch.org for more activist instructions and informational materials for waking others. We must all do our part to wake the still sleeping populations to what's unfolding before there's nothing left to salvage of our once thriving planet and its life support systems. Stand up and make your voice heard in this epic battle for the greater good on which all depends. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org.